All right. Good morning, YouTube. Looks like we're live. Bright and early Friday. How's everybody doing? Looks like all that wet weather is still pushing east. We'll get some of that storms they got going on, and really, there's still a lot of flooding going on in places and stuff like that. So the weather is very, very April-like. It seems like every day it seems like you come in here and there's another flood or something somewhere. It's been a pretty wet weather type of spring, it looks like. But the current status is a lot of that over the Midwest. And what do they call that? Off the Atlantic seaboard, Central Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, all the way up to Missouri and Illinois. But we're still dry out here. We're supposed to have rain a couple days from now or something, but some possibility of evening storms, I believe, is what it is. Later, not right now. It's been crystal clear most days around here, not a cloud in sight. But checking in on some of this weather. This is from your favorite channel. So let's kick this on, see what they're saying. Lots of flooding and severe storms, as they're reporting.
Cloud from yesterday in Indianapolis, Indiana. As we go into the weekend, storms are on the move, and here's what you need to know. We are looking at a very big system. Now, this is a front that's draped much across the country, and we have a very dynamic system that is likely to bring severe weather from the plains all the way off to the southeast and even parts of the mid-Atlantic. So this is a widespread area where we could have damaging winds, hail, and even the threat of tornadoes, but flooding a big risk with this system. So through Friday, we have storms. Saturday, it's more of the same. A lot of rain associated with this. We're talking a lot of tropical moisture being drawn into this system. But Saturday around the D.C. area, watch out in the mid-Atlantic. You could get some strong storms. Also, back through the southern plains, Oklahoma, Memphis, up through Springfield. You could even see a few tornadoes on the back edge of this system. And Sunday, it stays more of the same. Now, rain is going to be a big threat with this, and we are looking at the threat of flash flooding from the plains all the way through the mid-Atlantic. Places like Garden City down through the southern plains, you could pick up as much as 3 inches through the weekend.
All right, so there you have it. Yeah, lots of storms all through the east. Potential flooding and whatnot. Hey, good morning, Bikes. What's going on? Checking in out there in the chat room. Walter Davis, good morning. Looks like a lot of that's going to be headed your way if it's not already there. It looks like from the map that a lot of it is there already. So make sure you get your raincoat out. Sandbags if you need them. Flooding in Richmond already. Richmond, Virginia, I take it. I would just assume. Severe weather in the red. Oh, that goes all just down to the south, and that's Saturday. Lots of rain, storms, thunderstorms. Sunday, yeah, lots of fun for the weekend for everybody that was trying to mow your grass or whatever. Gonna have to time it or whatever's going on. Yeah, right, Bikes. We could use a little rain. Yeah, we had that little bit last weekend, but we can use a little bit. A little bit around here always helps. So that's your status there. Quite a bit on tap today. Might not get to everything, so the links are in your description box. Do not forget. Go check them out as we roll through this. But starting on the economic front, stock market's been getting pummeled. It's like on an 8-day losing streak or something like that. They can't make up their mind what to blame it on. Half the time it's the tariffs, et cetera, et cetera. But in particular noticeable, OPEC has made a decision on some different oil changes. They're looking at increasing moderately on their output, which has seemed to got people excited because yes, so oil prices popped up a little bit this morning. I guess they were expecting a lot of output, but the OPEC saying they don't have the capacity to pump out more. So thus the reaction, I guess you would say. They're looking at output increase of about 600,000 barrels per day. They're saying that some countries are already pumping at capacity. Obviously, Venezuela is a big problem. We've documented that collapse. for really, does any other word fit Venezuela than collapse? So they're missing a OPEC member there with their output. There were some people that were estimating they'd have a $1 million barrel a day increase, but that didn't happen. So I think that's what people reacting to that news, thinking that that's going to create some shortages or whatever, different places, causing the price to go up. Saudi Arabia and Russia are in favor of raising output. Other OPEC members, including Iran, have opposed this overall, looks like, during their meetings. So that's what to expect at the gas pump. We had just gotten a reprieve around here. It looked like things were popping back down below $3, and then it was depending on where you were at. Some were below $3, some weren't, and now it looks like we're going to be heading back up to $3.25 probably, with something like this fairly shortly. With the summer hitting, they're going to be hitting the gas prices again. So something to look out for, be aware of. Hey, good morning, M. Long. How you doing? Crazy Scotsman has joined us. Good morning. Walter. Yeah, I guess in Venezuela covers many different definitions in the dictionary. Yeah, a sideshow, clown show. There's all kinds of different definitions. Hey, Barry, what's up? 330 for gas still in your zone? That seems rather expensive. Is that like in-town prices or off the interstate prices or what? That's pretty pricey. Checking in on our favorite electronic currency, Bitcoin is dropping some more. It's below 6,400 for the first time in about a week after Japan's going to crack down. Of course, they're trying to protect against money laundering, of course, because they can't have Bitcoin doing what governments already do. But Bitcoin's being further manipulated, it looks like. Prices fell more than 5% today after Japan's financial regulator ordered several cryptocurrency exchanges to improve their practice against money laundering. It kind of just prevents the whole purpose of having a Bitcoin, doesn't it? If you can't have the anonymous factor in Bitcoin, what's the use? So that's going on. If you know any friends or family that are clutching onto those things, I don't know. I just don't see it until the government takes control of it, and then it's going to be worthless anyway. But then they're going to be forced to use it, stuck with it. So what do you do? closes out the article with in March, Japanese regulators issued punishment notices to multiple exchanges and forced some to stop business altogether after the $530 million theft of digital currency from exchange Coincheck, and issued a warning to Hong Kong-based Binance is the name of the company, for operating in the country without a license. So yeah, a lot of the cracking down on Bitcoin to bring it to the heel of the central banks, essentially. Hey, good morning, Castaway. You took away the planet portion of the title, or is this the second channel? Maybe not the same channel. How's things down there? Walter Davis says there should be a Walking Dead spinoff that takes place in Venezuela. Starving people eating zoo animals. Yeah, true story, right? You could do reality TV out of Venezuela. It'd be very similar. It'd be more like a Mad Max show than, I think, The Walking Dead maybe, but yeah. Good morning, Alicia. How's it going over in your side of the country? I guess we won't call it all yours, but how's Utah going? It's been nice and hot and dry in our area. I'd imagine your weather's been the same. Lots of wet weather out east. So next up, speaking of water and rain and everything else, we've been following all the different water situations, of course. It is the #1 issue in the West, pretty much. But Zero Hedge has an article, Water Wars, India facing its worst crisis in history. Obviously, we talked last week about the city issue, the article that was discussing how cities were going to have a crunch on potable water coming up. So it's coming to a head for a lot of people. Water is going to become an issue as they cram more and more people on top of each other. But India is facing its worst ever water crisis, as it says here, with some 600 million people facing acute water shortage. It draws data from 24 of India's 29 states, says the crisis is only going to get worse. Let's scroll down and see what they're talking about. So in this review, about 200,000 Indians die every year because of a lack of access to clean water. And this is also linked to a BBC report here. Many end up relying on private water suppliers or tankers paid for by the government. Winding queues of people wanting to collect water from tankers or public taps is a common sight in India's slums. Indian cities and towns regularly run out of water in the summer because of the lack of infrastructure to deliver piped water to every home. I did not know that. I mean, I figured there would be areas of the country, but that makes it sound like it's cities and towns in particular. The red is a low score. Let's see what this graphic really means. Pull this up here. That's not much better. But red would be bad. It would look like with only 3 states having a high score. What does that mean? Let's see. Oh, slow down. So it looks like under 50% of access to drinking water is in the red. A high score of over 65% is in the green, and 3 states have access to drinkable water. But with 600 million people facing high to extreme water stress, as they call it here. China is not a place to having problems. 84% of rural households do not have piped water access. Of course, in America, 100 years ago, that number was probably the same. So there's hope for that. I mean, that's not the end of the world. 70% of water is contaminated in India. India ranks currently 120 out of 122 countries in water quality. The battle for water. I don't know if they say anything about desalination like we've tried to get information on. Droughts are becoming more frequent in India. Here you can see the water supply versus demand in India graphic. 2008 versus their expected in 2030. Overall demand is expected to be twofold that of supply by 2030. Somebody needs to bump up their numbers. So that's just another example of failing infrastructure with the way cities and such are designed around the world, really. We were talking about Sao Paulo last week, and we've covered Cape Town, and now India as a whole. 40% of the Indian population will have no access to drinking water by 2030, with 21 cities running out of groundwater by 2020. I mean, that just sounds like a very dire prediction, but they're kind of stating here as fact. Affecting about 100 million people, which will cut 6% from their GDP by 2050. We will have to see. And they close out. Yeah, this is a good one. While trade wars are grabbing all the headlines, the water wars are where the real pain lies. Yeah, when it can, considering how dependent people have, I mean, you have to have water. I remember that links below. It does link over to a BBC article, so a little bit of background to it to check out. Hey, what's going on the site? Everybody's showing up in the side chat today. All right, Barry. Yeah, the whole scam with smart meters. It's a whole nother issue. Rebel Solutions has a good smart meter video he did years ago. I think if you even type in smart meters, it comes up as one of the top searches. It's really good. It's got a lot of views, but yeah, smart meters are an issue. Opting out, and when you opt out, you have to pay a fee because that's an actual person out there to check your meter, right? Shooting Local Dams with us. Hey, good morning. You're at work, but you'll okay. Hey, thanks for stopping by, checking in. Mother Nature, good morning. Alicia Clegg says, it is hot where you are. Okay, it's hot. Yeah, it's, you know, typical desert hot though, Alicia. Nothing you can't handle, I'm sure. Castaway desalinate liberal tears. They think that'll provide enough water for everybody. Oh, I'm not sure that's going to quite do it, but we'll take a note of that. Moving on. I might actually get through all this after all. Slow me down if you need to, if you need me to. As we've often covered and hypothesized as to what exactly is going on with the Chinese trade war and everything else and why. So this came up on the Zero Hedge. The U.S. is pushing toward war with China. It's just incrementalism, it seems like, and China steadily pushes back. You know, we had the big flotilla of Chinese Navy that went into the South China Sea and whatnot a couple months ago, and we've got the Chinese expansion economically, and you know, Chinese port visits into Venezuela and places in South America, and etc. It's back and forth. But this is highlighting the recent change of United States Pacific Command to where they're going to conglomerate all U.S. military forces in Asia will be called the Indo-Pacific Command. So they're rolling in the Indian subcontinent into that command structure as a title. And here they're saying, this is part of the article, the decision to change the name of U.S. forces in the Pacific is more than a symbolic, it's a threat. Potentially. It's one of those things. Definitely playing mind games with each other in a lot of respects, but who holds the ultimate upper hand in a lot of that? You've got to figure it's the home team. Extending yourself 5,000-6,000 miles across an ocean is not good strategy. So this is coming out of The Nation, an article they did. Most people didn't really cover the name change, but hypothesizing about the symbolic gesture, the nature of the name change. Is it a Pentagon ploy to encourage India to join Japan, Australia, and other U.S. allies in the Pacific Alliance? Or is it a symbolic nod to India's status and rolling it into the name change? And that was the headline of a Reuters story on the subject, was in symbolic nod to India, U.S. Pacific Command changes name. That was the Reuters story. And that was about the gist of it. And so when did this happen? I did not remember about this happening either. On May 30th is when the name change was announced. Okay. So it's been a couple weeks. I don't remember hearing about it either. It's about the time the World Cup started. More important things to do. So yeah, so this article just basically goes into the different approaches and what this name change could mean and how it is going right at China, potentially. As a preliminary indication of what he meant by this, Mattis promptly disinvited the Chinese from the world's largest multinational exercise, naval exercise that is, RIMPAC, which has been going on for a long time. So, in the backdrop of the name change, the United States has stepped up its naval patrols in waters adjacent to Chinese-occupied islands in the South China Sea, what we would call the Spratlys as well, I believe, raising the prospect of future clashes. There's also been accompanied by the more threatening language from the Department of Defense indicating the intent to do nothing less than engage China if that country's buildup in the region continues. And here's a quote from Mattis. When it comes to, that's Mattis, Secretary of Defense, if you don't know. When it comes to introducing what they have done in the South China Sea, there are consequences. Mattis declared at the Shangri-La Strategic Dialogue in Singapore on June 2nd. So China stepping 500 miles outside their back door is seen as a threat when we're 6,000 miles away from our coastline. That makes perfect sense. So yeah, more about the different provocateuring and statements people are making with each other on China and South China Sea, China's expansion militarily into areas, etc., and how we're countering it, or trying to counter, I guess I should say, which makes that North Korea thing all the more important. And this next paragraph, top here, goes into that. So this is a pretty long article. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but it definitely down there in the links for you to review. Closes out in the bold, highlighted, underlined. Right now, a Sino-American war sounds like the plotline of some half-baked dystopian novel. Unfortunately, given the direction in which both countries and their militaries are heading, it could, in the really relatively near future, become a grim reality. Yeah, I think a lot of people have been preparing that for a decade when you look at it. What's going on in that side chat? Where was I left off? Wes S is here. What's up, Wes? China dammed a lot of rivers north of India. Okay. Massive amounts of fresh water wasted every day by fracking. Yeah, there's a lot of fresh water wasted just pretty much everywhere. That's true. A lot of places have contaminated water before they even get it, though. Just there's contaminated wells all over the place around the world. Fusion centers, but Barry Wood says fusion centers require tons of water to cool their systems. Massive waste. That's the issue they had with Utah. I know that there was that water issue when they were trying to set up, and Utah was telling them no. Whatever happened with that, Alicia? I don't remember. I believe they probably set it up, but. And Alicia says here, NSA and how much water they waste, 1.7 million gallons a day. And that's the fusion center we're talking about? NSA Fusion Center. Is that the one in Utah, Alicia? How much water they use? Is that what the FDA used to be called, Barry? The Bureau of Chemistry? I've never heard that. Huh. Okay, Alicia. Yeah, Utah should have just told the NSA they're not getting 1.7 million gallons of water a day. You're out of your minds. With no plan to recycle or no plan to regenerate, get that back in the system somehow. That's absurd. I mean, mining uses a lot of water, but my goodness, 1.7 million gallons a day, that's the whole state. All right, one final article then that I guess I get to here, unless somebody has any other subjects they want to pop up in the side chat to bring up. But a good article that always piques my attention when it has cognitive dissonance in the title. So this is by Paul Craig Roberts. This is through Zero Hedge. So he says here on this top, he's going to use the 3 current top news stories to illustrate the disconnect that is everywhere in the Western mind. So this is bound to be interesting and worth your reading. If, again, the link's below to go check out. Definitely something I like to bring up whenever I can. So example, he brings up number 1 is this family separation issue on the border. This is great. The separation of children and immigrant refugees has caused a panic, has caused such a public outcry that President Trump has backed off his policy and signed an executive order terminating family separation. So we're all aware of that. So he gets down into here. The question is, how is it that Americans can see and reject the inhumane border control policy and not see the inhumanity of family destruction that has been the overriding result of Washington's destruction in whole or in part, of 7 or 8 countries in the 21st century? Millions of people separated by families, just death and conflict by Washington, 2 decades. Protests have been almost non-existent. So basically talking about the overseas war toll that has been brought about, family separation, family destruction, etc. And he closes out that paragraph with, how can it be that Americans see inhumanity in the separation of families and immigration enforcement, but not in the massive war crimes committed against people in 8 countries? We're experiencing mass psychosis, form of cognitive dissonance. The second example he uses, Washington's withdrawal from the United Nations Human Rights Council. So he goes back, so what's he getting to here? He's talking about the history of World War I, creation of Israel, Palestine, Balfour Declaration. He's talking about the UN, so the U.S. coming out of the Human Rights Council. So he's talking about how why did our ambassador walk out of the Human Rights Council? Simply because they criticized Israel's crimes against people, and that if you do that, you're automatically labeled as an anti-Semite and Holocaust denier, essentially. The absurdity of this is obvious, but few, if any, can detect it. Yes, the rest of the world, with the exception of Israel, has denounced Washington's decision. Not only Washington's foes and the Palestinians, but also Washington's puppets and vassals as well. To see the disconnect is to pay attention to the wording of the denunciation of Washington. A spokesman from the EU said that Washington's withdrawal from the Human Rights Council risks undermining the role of the U.S. as a champion and supporter of democracy on the world stage. So going on to the perspective of others. Name one place where Washington has been a supporter of democracy. That's a good question there. Just to speak of the most recent years, the Obama regime overthrew the democratically elected government of Honduras, imposed a puppet. The regime overthrew a democratically elected government in Ukraine. Is well documented that everybody wants to not acknowledge. So overthrowing the government of Ukraine, and also overthrew the governments of Argentina and Brazil, or undermined, probably maybe a better word. And is trying to undermine the government of Venezuela, he states. Well, sorry. So he's got some interesting perspectives here on how people are perceiving one thing in one way, and like I said, the cognitive dissonance part of the title. And the third example is the trade war Trump has launched against China. The claim is that due to unfair practices, China has a trade surplus with the U.S. of nearly $400 billion. The vast sum is supposed to be due to unfair practices on China's part. But in actual fact, the trade deficit with China is due to Apple, Nike, Levi, and other large number of U.S. corporations who produce offshore in China the products that they sell to Americans. When these products come here, they are counted as imports. So yeah, it's not like Chinese corporations are flooding America with stuff. It's American-based corporations that build things elsewhere and bring it here. A lot of it in China. I think that's a legitimate point. But people think of it as big. You can't really say that it's the Chinese government manipulating and undermining America's import economy when it's American corporations in a large extent, like the ones noted, and others, many, many others. So to sum this up, the Western mind and the minds of, as he calls it here, this is an interesting term, the Atlanticist integrationist Russians and pro-American Chinese youth. I can't even put all that into a word. I can't even say that. You're trying to describe Americans currently, I believe, are so full of propagandistic nonsense that there's no connection to reality. There is the real world and there is a propagandic side, made-up world that covers over the real world and serves special interests. He says his task is to get people out of the made-up world and into the real world. Support my efforts. I would second that. I think that's part of my mission. May not approach it the same way, but Paul Craig Roberts does some good work. That's an interesting article. It's down in your links, but just laying out some of the way things, current situation is explained to people and kind of the way it really works, or some of the facts behind it, not all the drama and emotion. What is going on out here in the side chat? Hey, Bikes, what's up? Nobody mentions the family court system that destroys family and separates them. Well, what about the public school system that takes kids away from their families every day? And in many jurisdictions, the public school system is attempting to supersede parents' authority, or does even in some jurisdictions, where they can simply take your kids away because a teacher saw a bruise on your kid's arm or something. Barry Wood says, all started with the Abraham Flexner report. Never heard of that. You got a link for that, Barry, or just look it up and Google it on our own? And now we're going to be pushing my time limit, and I didn't even think about it. We'll look this up real quick. Yeah, you can't be homeless and have kids. Kids get put in foster care, right, Barry? Right, Walter? Barry brings up child protection agencies are the biggest supermart of pedo Hey, Locked and Loaded, what's going on? Good morning. Walter's always putting out great videos. Did he put out one this morning? I'm sorry, I didn't check my things yet. So who's this Abraham Flexner feller? I'm going to look it up real quick. Hey, what's up, 01 Crom? Slash regulations, minimum wage, and fees and licenses so the USA can be more productive and compete. Right, 01, but people would rather protect their special interests and hold down competition. Remember, government's in place to prop up the corporations, not to give them competition. You get rid of all those fees and licenses, then there would be too much competition for companies to deal with. Oh, Walter, you have foster kids? That's got to be a tough deal there. So Abraham Flexner, since Barry had to put it in the side chat, or Barry did. I always still get Barry and Walter mixed up. Maybe it's just because they always comment next to each other. He conceived and developed the idea that found expression as the Institute for Advanced Study, serving as a founding director from 1930 to 1939. Prominent figure in American education reform, or would that also be considered the socialization of American education? Is that what we could thank this guy for? He had a profound impact on many areas of American education, especially medical, where influence can be seen today in the training of medical professionals, the culture of the physician, and the relationship between medical research and practice. So he's a medical guy. I'm not sure what the point was, Walter or Barry. What can we thank this guy for? It all started with him. Of course, they don't hit on that here, but this is the website of the organization he funded or started, the Institute for Advanced Study. Oh, we're going back to before the FDA, the Bureau of Chemistry. So he was one of the ones that started the Bureau of Chemistry. So I'm going to drop this in the links below and in the side chat, just because we're wrapping it up here in last minute stuff. So if you want to read about Abraham Flexner and his influence, and Barry's tying him to the FDA and before that the Bureau of Chemistry. Interesting. He's tied to Macy and the stock market crash, and he's got all kinds of background here. Liedensdorf. This is mostly about this institute, because it's on their website, so they don't get into any other stuff. But all right, we'll put that out there just so everybody has the information. Barry says he went around the country taking inventory of all the medical schools and taught chemical allopath medicine. Okay. So pharmaceutical preamble to pharmaceutical industry, potentially. And he would report that started the messed up medical system we have now. Okay. Good to know. Hey, Bob, what's up? 5150, the Bob has joined us. If you haven't seen Bob's stream from last night, you got to go check it out. He had an incident on the highway and he needed a hug afterwards. That was great. It was like true reality TV right there. And that was a good podcast you had with Carl last night too, Bob. That was good stuff. And you got $1, right? And Bob got $1 out of the whole deal, and his truck towed away. So that was all good. That was pretty good stream. All right, folks. So there's kind of your breakdown for today for your Friday. Sure, there's much more under the radar that we're missing out on, but watch out for that flooding and storms out east. As we talked, more pretty severe weather coming in pretty much everywhere east of St. Louis, north or south. So we'll leave you with that. Thanks for checking in. Remember, we'll be back in here in the morning on the Saturday morning extended version chat. And you guys go out and have a great Friday. Don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, share the articles, etc., etc. Get the information out there for discussion and contemplation. So with that, folks, have a good start to your weekend, and we will see you tomorrow, if not elsewhere, on the YouTube interweb places throughout the day. Live free.